To their joining the audience, what is notable about these tactics, apart from their dependence to some extent on white stereotypes of blacks, was that none of them were actually implemented. Although Alinsky claimed that getting word to the targets had a cohesive effect, one of his tactical innovations was the use of shared proxies to gain a right to speak at shareholder meetings and put companies on the spot, first achieved with Kodak stock in April 1967. Reports of the meeting suggest little sympathy from other shareholders, but here was a way to embarrass company boards and put them on the spot in a way that might be picked up by the media. Alinsky's distrust of liberals and tendency to romanticize the poor were traits he shared with the young radicals who moved into community organization, in the mid. But there was important differences. Here was results oriented. He was results oriented. Alinsky's distrust of liberals and tendency to romanticize the poor were traits he shared with the young radicals who moved in community organizing in the mid 1960s. But there were more important differences. He was results oriented. He wanted victories, even if small, which meant that he would form coalitions and cut deals. He knew that his natural constituents were minorities, and this became even more so as a majority of the American people identified with the middle class. He therefore understood the need for support from those who might otherwise be spectators. He was prepared to get his funds from rich liberals and was always looking to his targets' vulnerabilities on external support as a source of pressure, for example, customers or stockholders or some higher governmental authority. In terms of tactics, his basic need was to find new ways of sustaining campaigns and keeping them in the public eye, and here his own notoriety could be an advantage. He also understood that the degree of organization required, especially when undertaken by outsiders and professionals, was bound to be an issue in itself. The establishment was quick to point to the malign presence of outside agitators, a label Alinsky happily embraced, to delegitimize campaigns, just as the young radicals were wary of strong leaders who could easily set themselves up as an alternative establishment and leave the people as powerless as they had been at the start. Just as the young radicals now hoped, Alinsky had begun assuming that the organizer was drawing out a latent political consciousness, creating awareness not only of injustice but of the possibility of redress. Communities would be self-reliant and self-sustaining not only in their organization but in their consciousness, with a local leadership able to give voice to the consciousness and ensure its long-term authenticity. Alinsky made it rule, which he only came to question toward the end of his life, that no more than 3-year support should be provided to a company organization, after which they were on their own. No more than 3 years support should be provided to a community organization, after which they were on their own. Yeah, he was looking with people with few resources and little confidence, who were almost completely absorbed by coping with the everyday problems of existence. Alinsky's colleague, Nicholas von Hoffman, who worked with him for a decade before leaving in 1962 to become a journalist, described how the Lumpenproletariat faced a series of emergencies and chain of bad news. Gas is cut off, electrical service terminated, the landlord is evicting them, a cousin is in jail, the baby has to be rushed to the emergency room, one of the kids sassed a social worker, and the family is getting cut off. The reigning male came home and beat the hell out of the mother. What the fuck is this? Yeah, he was working with people with few resources and little self-confidence, who were almost completely absorbed by coping with the everyday problems of existence. So this is his colleague, Nicholas von Hoffman, who worked with him for a decade before leaving in 1962 to become a journalist, described how the Lumpenproletariat faced a series of emergencies and chain of bad news. Gas is cut off, electrical service terminated, and the landlord is evicting them. cousin is in jail. The baby has to be rushed to the emergency room. One of the kids says his social work in the family is getting cut off. The reigning male came home and beat the hell out of the mother. Wilson stole the food money. Janice is pregnant. Mother missed her appointment with the vocational counselor because she was drunk. As a result, the poor were unreliable, not the stuff of organizations which are bound together by keeping their commitments. In practice, that meant, as the civil rights movement also discovered, that the pool of credible and capable local leaders was small. The activist base was narrow. Only a few percent of any community were involved in Alinsky's campaigns. His methods, therefore, come to rely on careful organization and strong leadership. While that did not fit with the later fashion for spontaneity and participatory democracy, he judged that he got better results. His pragmatism was also reflected in his choice of campaigns. Von Hoffman recalled that Alinsky had no tolerance for a defeat that could have been avoided, no patience with moral victories. He picked fights that he could win on the grounds that not all injustices could be righted. Although the younger Alinsky had been prepared to cast himself in the role of heroic organizer, the elder Alinsky was more wary of the notion. The people who grasped power and its uses were rarely pure in their motives. If only they enjoyed the rough and tumble of politics, that could make them devious and cynical, relishing their notoriety, as he certainly did. And awareness of imperfection was to be preferred to a claim of perfection. In this regard, he worried about Cesar Chavez, a man whose work he supported. Chavez had been hired in the early 1950s by Fred Ross, who was running the Alinsky-sponsored community service organization in California to promote voter registration and workers' rights among Mexican farm workers. A decade later, Chavez left to form what became the United Farm Workers Union, UFW. He was a follower of Gandhi, adapting methods such as fasting and pilgrimages and insisting on nonviolence. In the spring of 1966, he led farm workers in a march from Delano to Sacramento, the California state capital. This was combined with a campaign for a nationwide boycott of Californian grapes. Alinsky was skeptical, but the boycott gained widespread